Wounded Knee stands as the final, tragic chapter in the long struggle of the Plains nations. On December 29, 1890, forces converged on a cold South Dakota ridge in an event that would reshape Native American life and American policy. In this video we will trace the causes, broken treaties, forced confinement to reservations, and the rise of the ghost ants, and reconstruct the day's events with careful attention to primary sources and survivor accounts. You'll hear the human stories behind headlines, understand how policy and fear intersected, and learn why Wounded Knee still resonates in conversations about justice and memory today. Stay with us for a clear, balanced look at what led to this turning point and how its legacy continues to matter. If you want more thoughtful historical episodes like this, consider subscribing. Hook, intro, cultural conflict, the disarmament attempt, the shooting, the massacre, historical impact, legacy. When Lakota families were intercepted near a frozen creek on the plains, patience had already worn thin on both sides. Soldiers and survivors converged under a pall of fear and misunderstanding. A mixed band led by Spotted Elk, often called Bigfoot, was seeking safety and shelter after a tense period that followed the death of a prominent leader and growing alarm among military authorities. The 7th Cavalry established a perimeter, and the scene was heavy with cold, confusion, and miscommunication. Small gestures took on large meanings. A raised hand or the movement of a rifle could be read as surrender or threat. Deep cultural conflict framed every interaction. Many Lakota had turned to the ghost ants, a spiritual movement promising renewal and the return of buffalo and relatives, and non-native officials misread it as incitement to violence. Federal policies had disrupted food supplies, land tenure, and traditional governance, leaving families vulnerable and leaders frustrated. Officials saw pacification as a military problem, while Native people experienced it as an assault on lifeways and sovereignty. Mistrust was not spontaneous. It had been built over years of treaty breaches, forced movements, and cultural suppression. The attempt to disarm the encamped band began as a routine military procedure but quickly became fraught. Soldiers moved to collect weapons to prevent any outbreak of violence, and interpreters and scouts negotiated under an uneasy sky. A deaf Lakota man named Black Coyote refused at first to surrender a rifle that he insisted was unloaded. Tensions rose as language barriers and different expectations collided. A struggle over arms was brief but decisive, and the small incident provided the spark that set events into motion. Orders were given and the mood shifted from containment to confrontation. Shots started in a chaotic instant, and accounts from survivors and soldiers alike described confusion rather than a clear battle line. Troops used rifles and at least one rapid-fire mountain gun known as a Hotchkiss, which could sweep across a camp. Some soldiers later reported being fired upon first. Many Lakota said they were attempting to comply when gunfire erupted. The noise and smoke under a winter sky made it difficult to distinguish whom to protect or where to flee. People tried to shield children and elders, and a few sought cover behind sleighs and tents. The scene unfolded quickly, with panic amplifying every movement. The outcome was devastating for the Lakota band. Estimates vary, but roughly 200 Lakota were killed and many more wounded. U.S. military losses were significantly smaller, with around 25 soldiers dead and several dozen wounded. Women and children were among the casualties, and survivors later recounted hurried burials in shallow graves and the long winter of mourning that followed. The Army awarded 20 medals of honor to participants, a decision that remains controversial and a point of moral debate to this day. Official reports and later investigations struggled with conflicting testimony, and families on the reservation were left to reckon with loss and displacement. The incident marked a turning point in the history of Plains nations and federal Indian relations. For many Native communities, it symbolized the definitive end of organized armed resistance on the plains and underscored the limits of treaty protections. In the wider public, the event produced both condemnation and rationalization. Newspapers and politicians debated causation, responsibility, and the costs of westward expansion. Some congressional inquiries followed, and historians have since examined how policy, prejudice, and miscommunication produced catastrophe. Memory politics emerged quickly. The same facts were wielded to justify actions or to demand justice. Legacy has taken many forms over the ensuing decades. Descendants and Native activists have sought recognition, reburial, and the rescission of controversial military honors. The site became a place of annual remembrance and a touchstone for movements asserting Indigenous rights, including an occupation decades later that drew national attention to treaty obligations and sovereignty. Museums, memorials, and oral histories have worked to preserve testimony and to frame the event within a longer story of resilience and cultural survival. Calls for reconciliation continue alongside efforts to educate the public about the complexities of law, policy, and human cost. If this account is useful, consider subscribing for more concise historical summaries and sources that help unpack difficult episodes with care. The story of Wounded Knee is more than a single day in 1890. It marks a turning point that ended large-scale armed resistance by many Plains nations and exposed the pressures of United States expansion, broken treaties, and cultural disruption. We have traced how spiritual movements, military presence, and deep misunderstandings converged, and how the aftermath reshaped policy, memory, and the lives of Native communities. Remembering Wounded Knee means acknowledging loss, honoring resilience, and learning from a history that still affects descendants today. If this account resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on what it teaches about power, responsibility, and how societies remember difficult pasts. If you enjoyed this careful look at history, consider subscribing for more thoughtful narratives and to support continued research and storytelling. In future videos, we will explore treaty histories, the broader context of the ghost dance movement, personal stories of survival and cultural revival, and how memorialization continues to evolve. Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments and pass this along to others who want to learn.